ultimately, this comes down to who do you think has your best interests in mind? Who do you think wants opportunity for the many and not the few? And frankly, the proof is in the pudding. We have seen with the Trump tax cuts, the concentration of wealth at the top. Frankly, the middle class saw higher taxes, while with this opportunity agenda that Vice President Harris is putting forward, the announcement today is an example of that. 25 million new business registrations as the goal, working towards that startup expense, those expenses being deductible at a higher rate, tenfold, $50,000, where we know it costs on average of $40,000 to start a new business. So again, the question is, who is fighting for you and those in your lives so that everybody can have opportunity?
Well, Congressman, does there have to be a certain degree of honesty here about whether Kamala Harris can fight that fight alone? She's not going to be able to institute this policy or any others regarding the revenue and spending of this government without Congress control, right? And even if you and your colleagues can win back the majority, it's not looking as optimistic, perhaps, in the Senate.
Well, look, I am an optimist, and you know, the only poll that matters is that on election day, and so we're going to be working hard. I am cautiously optimistic that Speaker Hakeem Jeffries will be something that comes to fruition. I am also confident that we will be able to hold the Senate. Now, that's going to take a lot of work, and I think Vice President Harris's presence on the ticket has buoyed our potential, and I feel very strongly that the American people, when presented with these options of investing in an opportunity agenda. We heard previously last month on housing and in ensuring that everybody has the opportunity to own a home. Today on growing small businesses and cutting red tape versus a double down on trickle down economics, making permanent, which has been one of the biggest increases in income disparity and wealth disparity in our country. That's the choice that Americans have. And I believe that most of them will side for everybody having a seat at the table and growing their pie.
Well, Congressman, we're down to, I believe it's 62 days to that final poll you referred to in November. How important is it for Kamala Harris? And I'll hear from all the Harris supporters on Twitter about this. We're asking the same about both campaigns. Does she have to detail how she's going to pay for all of her proposals?
Well, I think that's part of the process, and we are hearing that. You know, I think over time, again, this campaign, as you noted, has 62 days left, 62 days to make a case to the American people and explain what we'll do regarding taxes, making sure that there is true tax fairness, that there is an opportunity for those companies who aren't paying their fair share to contribute in a fair, reasonable way to the strength and growth of our economy so that everybody can thrive. So those explanations are underway. And that is in contrast to what, you know, the former president has talked about in terms of giveaways to industry in exchange for support. That is not how this economy is meant to work. And I believe in the fairness that the vice president will pursue with her opportunity agenda will lay that out very clearly.
Of course, sir, it's not just a question of the kind of economic policy she'll pursue, but foreign policy as well, especially in light of the developments over the last few days in the Middle East, the death of 6 hostages that were being held by Hamas, ongoing pressure on the Netanyahu government and Hamas to agree to a ceasefire. I ask you this knowing you sit on the Foreign Affairs Committee. What does Kamala Harris need to say to the American people about the policy she will pursue when it comes to Israel and Gaza?
I think what you'll hear from the vice president is a clear and focused set of goals around achieving peace, ultimately a two-state solution. But in the near term, making sure that we get the negotiated end to hostilities and get hostages back, as well as provide a robust set of humanitarian responses to a situation that has turned into a cycle of violence where there is a deficit of hope. And so we'll continue to hear from the vice president and in her capacity. As you know, she has traveled around the world, met with hundreds of world leaders executed a diplomatic agenda on behalf of the Biden-Harris administration. So she is one of the most experienced people to step into the Oval Office when she wins on a foreign policy, from a foreign policy perspective. So I expect her to lay out a continued commitment to diplomatic resolutions to tragic situations like one we're seeing in Gaza.
Well, Congressman Amo, we don't need to tell you that the issue surrounding Israel specifically has been a major point of concern for progressive Democrats who have been disappointed with the Biden administration's approach to helping to protect civilian lives, for instance, in Gaza. Will progressives be disappointed all over again when they realize that Kamala Harris has the same policy?
Well, I see that Democrats, by and large, are excited about Vice President Harris. And I think they will see that in her approach, which will be that she is driving, is going to be about finding solutions, bringing people together. There's a lot of divisiveness on this issue. This is not a political football. This is about lives. This is about people who are suffering, the poor hostage families who are, desperately seeking answers, and those who have lost so many in Gaza, so many Palestinians who, for no fault of their own other than the birth lottery, are suffering. And so I think you will see a compassion from her that is consistent with our values and will really speak to all of the concerns across the broad and big tent of the Democratic Party.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, Congressman, as you join us today from Rhode Island with Harris spending time in New Hampshire, if you could just speak to the state of play in New England overall. Is New Hampshire an area in which this campaign needs to devote time and resources? Is it actually something that's going to be a real contest in this cycle?
Well, look, nothing is a given in politics, and we were going to be working hard in New Hampshire. In fact, I've been there previously this cycle, spent time in Exeter and Manchester and Concord, and we'll go back to make the case to my New England neighbors that we have to work hard. This is not an election that is going to be a blowout. It's going to be close. We are the underdog. The vice president is the underdog. Make no mistake about it. But with all of the work that we will do, New England will go blue, and we will make sure that to send a clear message that we want an agenda focused on protecting our freedoms, expanding economic opportunity, and making sure this democracy can stand for the betterment of all Americans, especially all of the folks that I share New England with here in Rhode Island.